Welcome everyone to day 4 of the AACUC virtual conference. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm Shelton Rolak, your Master of Ceremonies. We hope you're enjoying the conference so far. And it's been, AACUC has taken this virtual event to the next level. And I want to extend a special shout out to all those working behind the scenes. You guys have done a phenomenal job. A special thank you to Renee Sadie-White and Michelle Outlaw. Renee, you're my hero, and Michelle, you always make everything better. So big ups to you all for putting on a great event. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items and announcements to share with you. All sessions will be recorded and uploaded by August 24th. Yes? So look out for those in a little less than a couple weeks. The recordings will be accessible the same way you assess the session through the conference center. To maintain the integrity of the recordings, all participant mics have been muted throughout the session. We will have time for a question and answer period at the end of today's session. Please use the chat box to ask questions for the presenters, and we will pass them along to the session moderator. You all have been doing an amazing job of keeping the chat box live, by the way, so keep up the good work on that. If you experience any technical difficulty, please just reach out to a member of the tech team and they will resolve the issue for you. We invite you to share your experience of the conference on social media using the hashtags CTC 2020, AACUC 2020, changed, AACUC, CU_Unite, CU_BLM. We also invite you to give us feedback through a short survey at the end of the conference. Yesterday, AACUC presented an initial donation to the United Negro College Fund in the amount of $6,000. We will continue to take donations through the end of the conference and make a second donation on Monday, August 17th. The goal is $10,000, so please continue to give. If you would like to donate to UNCF, please visit the AACUC booth in the virtual exhibit hall or donate directly on the AACUC.org website. Prizes. At the end of the session, there will be a drawing for prizes donated by our sponsors and exhibitors. If your name is drawn as a winner, we will contact you to arrange delivery of your prize. We would also like to thank our title sponsor, PSCU, and today's program sponsor, Visa, and as well as all of our other sponsors. Thanks to the generosity of our sponsors and exhibitors, we can bring this conference to you free of charge. Please thank them when you visit the booth and in the exhibit hall. I would now like to welcome Ruby Alvarez, Assistant Vice President of Community Development at GECU in El Paso, Texas, who will introduce the panelists for our amazing session. Ruby?
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I'm honored to introduce our panelists, and our first panelist is Camille York. Camille is a certified financial advisor from Raymond James and Associates in Tampa, Florida. Camille is a trailblazer and extremely passionate about setting an example and moving the needle in an industry where women are often underrepresented and underserved. Welcome, Camille.
Thank you so much, Ruby. Hello to all of you, and thank you for that wonderful welcome and introduction. It is such an honor and a privilege to be here with you all today. Last night, I had the privilege of sitting in on one of the after hours events, and I can't tell you how inspiring it is to be among so many professionals who are invested and truly committed to change. What an awesome theme for this year, and being committed. So the vulnerability and authenticity that was shared last night was so inspiring that I'm just excited to be here with you all. As introduced, I'm a financial advisor with Raymond James, and my background and introduction into the industry, although did not start in wealth management, started with financial literacy with actually a local credit union. So hello to all my Suncoast peeps. it was through that, coupled together with my journey in wealth management, that I began to really stare directly into that racial wealth divide. And I recognized my role in kind of leading that conversation and educating and addressing and assessing exactly, what was going on. And so as we discuss the racial wealth divide today, we'll explore what it means to really bridge that income equality gap. So let's take a look at our agenda. So we'll look at, again, closing the income gap, closing the wealth gap, and then being the change, because I think it's important that we understand why we're here, where we are, and then where we're going, especially during a time such as this. There are some fundamental truths that we need to address as they play a role in our lives each and every day. And so we'll go ahead and just jump right into it with closing the income gap. So oftentimes when someone mentions racial financial inequality, they only think about income, which, as we'll explore, there are many more layers to it. But I thought that this was a good starting place because it's often the first thing that comes to mind when we think about pay equity. When I think about the income gap, there's a quote that comes to mind, and I'm a quote person, so you'll get a lot of these. But it's Martin Luther King Jr., and he said, "Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be." This is the interrelated structure of reality. And so the racial wealth divide is not just a Black problem or a Latino problem or a white problem. It's a problem for us all. And until we all are able to address and wrap our arms around it, no one can be who they ought to be until we all are able to get to where we ought to be. So it's all of our problem. But I want to start with looking specifically at the income gap when it comes to Black men. So when we look at the income gap for Black men, we see that Black men make on average 87 cents for every dollar earned by their white counterparts. And so for those who love numbers, I will say that statistically speaking, this was not a representative of a controlled sample size. And so this was just a general 1.8 million employees surveyed and not equalized based upon education, qualifications, and all of those things. So then if we take it a step further and equalize all of those things, where does that put us? So on average, Black males earn 98 cents for every dollar earned by their white male counterparts when you equalize education, experience, location, and qualifications. And so although it doesn't seem like much, when you think about the median salary for a white male based upon this sample, it's $72,900, which means Black employees are then paid $71,500, leaving a $1,400 difference based just attributable to race because we've equalized all the other factors. And so although $1,400 on every year may not seem like a lot per year, when you compound that by 5 years, that's $7,000, 10 years, that's $14,000. And think about all the other financial choices that could have been made, whether it was debt repayment, investing, saving, so many financial choices along the way. Those have now become missed opportunities. And so we can clearly see the gaps that exist when it comes to income for Black men. And those numbers are exacerbated when we look at Black women. So there's another quote. It's actually an African proverb, one of my favorites. And it says, "If you educate a man, you educate an individual. But if you educate a woman, you educate a family or a nation." And I love that quote because 80% of Black women are sole or primary breadwinners of the household. And so a fair salary for a Black woman can be the difference between struggling and sustainability for an entire family. So when we talk about generational wealth, that's what we mean, passing down that legacy throughout the generations for an entire family. And so paying Black women not only allows them to support their family, but also contribute to the overall economy. So back to that first quote when I said, it's about all of us and how it greaters the common good for everyone involved. So I see you all in the chat, and I want to know, does anyone know the significance of today, specifically as it relates to Black women? And it should be significant for all of us, but it's specific to Black women today. Does anybody know what today is? Go for it. Tell me what it is. Yes, it's Black Women's Equal Pay Day. And I say that not out of celebration, but out of an awareness, because it takes until today, until this month, for Black women to earn what their white, non-Hispanic counterparts earned at the close of 2019. So we're just now coming up equal for what our counterparts earned last year. It takes Black women approximately 19 months to earn what their white male counterparts earn in 12. And so if you have not said anything about it, especially to your network, I encourage you to bring awareness to that. It is a huge disparity. And so start the conversation. I've posted on my social media. So if you don't know what to say, you can repost or just hashtag Black Women's Equal Pay Day, whatever you want to say about it. But just make sure that we're encouraging that conversation because it's definitely something that we all need to be aware of. But let's go ahead and take a deeper look at the numbers. One of the starting places when I think about the inequality in income is that we are largely overrepresented in underpaying jobs or low-paying jobs and underrepresented in high-paying jobs. So when you think about the higher paying workforces, so engineer, computing, we're about 1% of the engineering workforce and 3% of the computing workforce. And unfortunately, those are the areas that tend to have the smallest pay gap when it comes to gender and race. So severely underrepresented there. And so oftentimes we think of education as the great equalizer, right? So obviously, okay, the way to transition out of lower paying jobs is maybe education. But Black women are becoming educated and becoming college educated at unprecedented rates. And unfortunately, it does not shield Black women from the pay gap or the wealth gap that exists. So what do those numbers actually look like? I'll draw your attention to that first level, so no high school degree, where Black women are earning 60 cents for every dollar that white non-Hispanic men are earning. And so it levels out a little bit more when we look at the associate degree. But what I really want you to see is that what Black women earn at the associate's degree level is still under what white non-Hispanic men are earning without a high school degree. So I'm just going to let you marinate on that for a little bit, because that's a huge issue. And so Black women cannot afford to rely on education alone to close the pay gap and the wealth gap. And that's really the nugget that I want you to take away from here, that it's not education alone that removes you from that pay disparity and the wealth gap. So Black women live at the intersection of sexism and racism. And although sexism and racism are very distinct forms of discrimination and they manifest differently, those effects are compounded when a person experiences them both at the same time. And that is why Black women are affected and impacted so drastically when it comes to pay inequality. Another life aspect that contributes to the income gap is youth. So Serena Williams has a quote that says, "You have to believe in yourself when no one else does." And I think the great point about that is that you have to be your own advocate. You have to advocate for yourself when it comes to your equal pay, when it comes to negotiation. And I think negotiation is one of the starting places for you to start that conversation for equal pay. So let's take a look at what negotiation looks like. How common is negotiation for new grads? Only 38% of new graduates are negotiating. I had the privilege of taking an art of negotiation course the last year of my master's coursework. And so once I graduated, my first job out of college, I negotiated and I was able to secure about 10 grand more than what they offered me coming in the door, which was a big deal for me. So I did it for two reasons. One, I just wanted to try out my new skills, to be honest. I was like, I got these new skills, let me put them to use. Let's see if they actually work. And they did. But two, my mom was very intentional in saying, let's make your hypothetical budget, right? So you're graduating from college, you're gonna have real bills, you can't come back home, so let's figure this out. And so we went through, what would rent look like? What would the water bill look like? She like, you take long showers, you leave all the lights on. Like, she was so honest and so real with me. But I appreciate that so much, because at the end of the day, I realized that I could not sustain the lifestyle that I wanted to have based upon what they were offering me. And so it was needed that I negotiated, and I realized how that foundation set the trajectory for every raise or every promotion thereafter. So new grads simply are not negotiating. And then when it comes to women are less likely to negotiate than men. But 90% of employers have never retracted an offer because of an entry-level candidate trying to negotiate. So I think that that's what discourages a lot of us oftentimes from negotiating, is that, well, what if they take the offer back? But this shows you that there's just a 10% chance that they will. So the odds are in your favor to just go forth and negotiate. And most employers have room to increase. 74% of employers have room to increase that first offer by 5 to 10% during negotiations. So you are simply leaving money on the table by not negotiating. 80% of graduates who negotiate are partially successful. So what does negotiation look like? It's not always about salary. So I tell people this all the time. Maybe it's more vacation days. Like, if that's something that's super important to you and you need time to travel, and that, is invaluable to you, then maybe negotiate that paid time off. Or maybe it's a flexible schedule. Like, hey, I really would like these hours. Is there something that we can do? And not all of that is negotiable, but you never know until you ask. Maybe it's bonus. What does the bonus structure look like? Or employee stock. So make sure that you are not leaving any money on the table or any benefits on the table when it comes to negotiation. So now that we've talked about the income gap, let's jump to the very real wealth gap that we are all facing. So what is wealth? Wealth is the buffer for families when they are faced with unexpected economic shocks. So say loss of a job, broken down car, COVID-19. That's what allows you to absorb some of that economic shock. But it's also the capital that's available for you to take advantage of economic opportunities. So buying a home, saving for college, investing in the stock market. So wealth is kind of twofold. And when I think about wealth, I think about a quote from James Baldwin. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So it's another point just to say, no longer can we afford to not face this head on and not talk about the elephant that's in the room, because no change will ever come as long as we keep it hidden or don't talk about it. So it's not until we choose to address it head on, until we face it, that change can actually occur. So income inequality is stark, but it pales in comparison to the vast economic divide that's exposed when we examine the disparities in wealth. So let's take a look at what that looks like. Again, economic inequality in the United States is usually focused on income. And while income does play a role, it's often misguided when we define middle class solely by income. Black and Latino families would need to earn 2 to 3 times as much as white families in order to actually enter the middle class when we define it by wealth rather than income. If we define the middle class in terms of wealth, households would need to own, so net assets minus liabilities, own $68,000 to $204,000 of wealth to qualify for the middle class, which drastically changes what we think, because we only think of what your salary is, but it's, what do you actually have at the end of the day? Black and Latinos household with advanced degree would typically be the only household with enough wealth to be considered middle class. Roughly 70% of Black and Latino households would fall below that $68,000 of wealth threshold needed to enter that middle class status, whereas only 40% of white households would fall below that middle class. So let's take it a step further and look at the household wealth gap. So this is a very great chart in the fact that it talks about the Great Recession. So the years of 2007 to 2009, and what impact it had on the Black and Latino community. So as you can see, obviously the Black and Latino community started well behind the white population when it comes to wealth. So starting in 1983, but eventually there started to be a climb and there started to be an increase in wealth. But what's important to look at here is that the Great Recession, although it impacted everyone as a whole, white wealth never dipped below where it was in 1983. And it's unfortunate that the same is not true for Black and Latino families. And in fact, it's been on a downward slide since the Great Recession. When we think about periods of major economic impact or health disparities, and we think about who COVID-19 is directly impacting, it typically has a very large negative impact on our community. And that speaks volumes to the wealth divide. So if it's disproportionately impacting households of color, where do we go from there? How do we become the change? And what do we need to look at for change? So there's another quote by James Baldwin, of course. It says, "You have to decide who you are and force the world to deal with you, not its idea of you." So again, defining who we want to be as individuals, as a community. What is it that we really want? And then asking and demanding it while also doing our part. And so when it comes to creating change, I think one of the starting places is income advocacy. Some of the ways that you can advocate for your income, payscale.com is a great resource that helps you figure out salary negotiations and professional growth, but gives you real hard data to back it up. So when I talk about making negotiations, be strategic. Don't just go in there asking for wild numbers. Have your data and be able to back up that information so that it's a solid argument. Another one is the Salary Project. So the Salary Project is a platform for peers to share and compare salary data. So another great resource for you to start figuring out, okay, what should I be asking for? And then when you think, what should I be asking for? Well, how do I know my worth? Glassdoor has a wonderful resource. It's a calculator that based on your title, your company, your location, your experience, they will calculate your worth and even current openings available to you that have the potential to pay you your worth. So you're able to really see, am I being underpaid? And then, what do I do to get my proper compensation? Another resource is Comparably. So it reveals company culture and market compensation. Again, real employees are contributing to this data, so it makes it credible in real time. And it just showcases different employers' brands that are fair and accurate in their pay. Get Raised is another really strong resource when it comes to constructing your raise requests. They help you maximize your chances of actually achieving that raise. So they'll tell you how to structure it, if you're being underpaid, what to ask for, some of those buzzwords. And last but certainly not least is your network. Many of us, and I know myself personally, have friends and family who work within the HR network. And so although, not asking them to disclose anything that they shouldn't disclose, but they are close enough to tell you what employers are looking for, what language you should be using, what makes for a strong negotiation. And so that's part of being the community and tapping into the resources that are in your own backyard. Leverage your friends, your family, the people who you know, so that you can have a much stronger ask and that you can successfully negotiate or ask for a raise. So if you have someone in your network who is in the HR, make sure that you're leveraging their expertise as well. So let's take a look at some tips to promote wealth building. One is understanding. And that's a lot of why we're here today, right? So talking about the issues, talking about the situation and what's going on and the challenges that we face, really getting that understanding. And furthermore, coupling that with education. So I think education is super important. So many books and resources. A lot of this came from The Road to Zero Wealth, which is a really great PDF talking about what wealth will look like or the lack thereof in years to come if we don't take action to address it. The book I'm reading right now is The Color of Money. There are great Netflix documentaries that you can watch. Like, you can listen to podcasts, you can read books, you can watch documentaries, whatever is your flavor of learning. There are so many resources available to you if you just seek out that information. But it's important that we all educate ourselves, whether you are a person of color or not, to truly understand the disparities that exist. Next is access. I think oftentimes people of color doubt the accessibility of certain resources. And that's one of the reasons why I took on this role as a financial advisor, is that I want my community to understand that they have access to a financial advisor and different investment vehicles and savings tools, and that we don't have to just keep doing what we've always been doing, because it's not really getting us too far. But you do have access to so many things. If you, one, seek out understanding and seek out the education, you realize just how much is actually available to you. Another thing is savings. So when we think about liquid asset poverty, 57% of Black America is in liquid asset poverty. So we're simply not saving enough. We don't have enough cash flow to sustain when economic impact happens. And that's the issue, right? So we don't have that true wealth. We don't have those buffers because we're simply not saving enough. So the next thing is investing. And I just saw this on Instagram earlier today. It said, how many millionaires do you know have become wealthy by solely investing in savings accounts? I'll wait. That's not what they're doing. So yes, save. That's all great. It's fine and well, and you should save, but you can't solely save and not invest. And we'll get into, in a later panelist, we'll go into more of those ways that you can invest, but you've got to couple it together with a few different things and a few different strategies. And lastly, streams of income. I know we often talk about this, so making sure that your 9 to 5 is not your only source of income, because what happens when something like COVID happens and you lose your main source of employment? You know, do you own real estate that's paying you? Or do you have a side hustle that's paying you? Where are your other pools of income, so that if one stream falls, you've got a few others to sustain you until you get that stream back? These are some of the ways that really help you sustain yourself and get you toward that wealth building. So I'll leave you with this last quote by Dr. Martin Luther King, and it says, almost always, the creative, dedicated minority has made the world better. And I say that because oftentimes we don't leverage our minority identity. And that's actually something that was on my vision board at the start of this year. You are what makes the world better. Your diversity in every shape, form, fashion. It gives way to new and innovative, forward-thinking solutions and ideas. And you've seen so much research come out about teams that are diverse and that help move companies forward. So know your worth and add tax. Seek understanding, educate yourself, and become empowered when it comes to advocating for your income, for your wealth. I heard a podcast recently that said the whole is always greater than the sum of its parts. So if you're an ally, making sure that you are advocating for those who are in the room or for those who should be in the room and don't yet have access. So in closing, I'll just say, let's all be committed to change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Camille. That was great. That was amazing, actually. Really amazing information. Now we have Frederick Pelham. He is a registered representative at Prime America. Utilizing Prime America's How Money Works materials, Frederick teaches the basics of personal finance to help from a solid foundation toward making healthy choices. Welcome, Frederick.
How you doing? How's everybody?
Great, and yourself?
I'm great. Thank you all. Excited to be here. So what I'm gonna do, like you said, I'm the financial arena investment advisor. So what we do is we help families set their financial table. Okay, so when we talk about setting the financial table, it's a plan that we put together to help families start to build lasting generational wealth. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, my session is, it's gonna require some interactivity with you guys. So what I'm gonna do, I'm asking a few questions. We have you got to participate with me as we're going through, okay? All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna sit down and show you how we set a financial table. So we use the illustration of a table because the table has 4 legs, okay? So as you're looking at the screen here, you have 4 legs here. You have the life insurance, the long-term investment, the emergency account, and regular savings, okay? So I'm gonna explain to what each 40 legs do, and then we're gonna begin our, the interacting part, okay? So the life insurance is self-explanatory, you know, life insurance. Long-term investments, that's something that you start today and you're not thinking about it today. You're thinking about 20, 30 years from now, okay? Long-term investments. The next leg you see there's emergency accounts. Emergency accounts for things you don't plan for. Unexpected stuff that comes up, COVID, has a flat tire, you got, you know, something unexpectedly that you don't plan for. That's what our emergency funds are. And then we have the regular savings. Now the regular savings are things we do plan for. Vacation, birthdays, holidays, stuff like that, okay? So what we're gonna do, we go to the next picture here in a second. So I'm gonna ask you guys, everybody on this call right now, number these legs in order of importance from most important to least important, okay? So I want you to look at this table. You got life insurance, long-term investments, emergency account, regular savings. So what would be number 1 for you? Somebody say all tied is first. Okay, yes, they're all important, but if we had to order these in order of importance from most important to least important, okay? So you have a poll we're doing here. Which one of these legs of the financial is most important to you? All right, so you have emergency funds, you have regular savings, you have long-term investments, you have life insurance. So I need you guys to go ahead and vote for me. Okay, did we? I don't see it. Maybe they're still doing the voting. Okay. All right, is everybody? Cool, perfect, all righty. So, wow, okay, so just remember your, okay? So a lot of you guys said emergency account is number 1 for you guys, okay? Some people said regular savings, long-term investment. Okay, perfect. All right, so just remember whatever you did, okay? So a lot of you guys, over half of you guys said emergency account is number 1. Perfect, all right? So now what we're gonna do is, we'll look at that emergency account because, you know, a lot of people often go straight to the emergency account. So looking at the next slide, I ask clients this all the time, what's a comfortable dollar amount you like to have in your emergency account for any unforeseen emergencies? So some people say they want 1 month's worth of savings. Some people say they want 3 months. Some people say 6 months worth of your salary. Some people say as far as a year, okay? So what would you say is a comfortable dollar amount that you like to have aside in your emergency account at some point? I'm not saying you have it right now, but at some point, if you had to build this table, what would be the comfortable amount you like to have for your emergency account? So I'm gonna give you guys a second to do that as well. And these are the questions that we ask a lot of clients when we first started out. We help everybody set their financial table. So right now, there's no right or wrong answer. I just want to hear what you guys are saying. Then we're going to address those shortly, okay? Okay, perfect. A lot of people saying 6 months worth of salary. That's pretty typical. I hear that pretty often, okay? So next, we're going to look at one more thing, your regular savings. So what's a dollar amount roughly that you like to have in your regular savings? Now, like I said, regular savings, you think about like vacation, birthdays, holidays, things of that nature, things that you plan for, okay? So, yeah, there we go, perfect. You want $500 in your savings account, $1,000, $250, $2,500, $5,000 or more. So like I said, regular savings, we categorize that as stuff you do plan for, vacation, birthdays, holidays, things of that nature. Okay, all right, pretty good. Pretty much everybody's either 5,000 or more, perfect. All right, so now that you guys have, ideally, you label the legs of the table from most important to least important for you. You also, identify, roughly what you want to have for your emergency account, also what you want to have for your regular savings. The next question that I ask clients is, what's the comfortable dollar amount that you can put aside roughly every month if you want to fund your whole table? Okay, so when I tell people comfortable, I tell them all the time, I don't want you sitting in the house in the dark eating ramen noodles, okay? I want a comfortable number you can put aside every month if you had to attempt to fund your entire table, okay? A comfortable amount. All right, so you can write that down. You can think about that number right there. All right, whatever that number is for you. We don't have we didn't do a poll for that one, but somebody said rice and beans, either one. Okay, but I want a comfortable number you put aside every month. All right, so now follow me here for a second, okay? Now a lot of you guys said emergency account is number 1. So I'm just hypothetically, imagine you said you could put aside every month, say $500 a month, comfortably to fund your whole table. Okay, so whatever that money that you put aside every month, that money had to go around the whole table. So it go to regular savings, your emergency account, your long-term investment, and your life insurance. We look at it all holistic. Okay, so imagine this scenario, because a lot of times, surprisingly, just like you guys said, a lot of people say emergency account is number one for them. So imagine your table. You said you could do $500 a month, all right, to fund your whole table. So imagine for the month of we're in August. Imagine you put $500 in that emergency account right now. Now, hold on. Before I begin, I want you to understand. I'm going to talk to you as if you have nothing in place, okay? So I'm talking to you guys as if you have nothing on this table already. And I'm talking to all those people that said regular savings or either emergency account or long-term investment, anything, whatever you just said that's number one for you, follow me in this scenario, okay? But just so happened, emergency account was number one that most people said, so I'm going to address that leg first, okay? So imagine you guys say, you know what? I can do $500 a month comfortably. I'm going to put $500 in my emergency account for the month of August, okay? Because you want to get that off to a fast start. You love the idea of building that up, okay? And say you did it again also for the month of September. So you did another $500 in the month of September, okay? Because you just love the idea of doing, getting this table. You want to get this off to a fast start. And imagine you're going to do it again for the month of October, but heaven forbid something happens, you're no longer here. What would your family have so far set aside in that emergency account? Roughly about $1,000, right? Or no, you didn't get to the, you was about to do it for the month for October, but you passed away. So you really only have $1,000 in that emergency account, right? So would $1,000 be enough to take care of your final expenses and make sure your family's okay? Heaven forbid something happens to you. And typically, most people say that would not be okay. That's not enough, okay? So the order we suggest people go in, now, like I said, it's only a suggestion, but we tell people, we say number one should be your life insurance. You want to protect yourself today as if you're going to leave here today, okay? We tell people number two should be your long-term investment. You want to invest as if you're going to live forever, okay? Number three, we say is an emergency account. And number four is your regular savings. That's the order we suggest, okay? Like I said, it's only a suggestion, but I'm going to say it again. Number one is life insurance. We tell people you want to protect yourself today as if you're going to leave here today. We tell people number two should be your long-term investments. You want to invest as if you're going to live forever, okay? Because that's going to free you over time, and I will show you how. Number three is your emergency account, and number four is your regular savings. Again, only a suggestion, but I'm going to give you a story of what happened to me since I've been in this field, okay? Because a lot of you guys may not know, but I used to be an intern here at the AACUC. My background was digital media. I started doing this, I was like 19, 20 years old, all right? I was doing a lot of the design stuff, for the organization, and I was a university professor, and then I stumbled upon this information right here, and I've been in the financial arena for over 5 years now, okay? So I'm gonna tell you what happened to me in this short period of time since I've been doing this, okay? And yes, somebody said, yeah, you basically just go counterclockwise, excuse me. All right, so I actually sat down with a guy on October 30th, 2018. We was gonna do his entire table. But he said, you know what? What you said makes sense. Let's go ahead and set that life insurance up first, okay? So we did his life insurance on October 30th. On November 11th, he passed away, okay? His family was so glad he put money in that life insurance leg first instead of any other leg. Because if he had put that money in that emergency account or that regular savings or even the long-term investments, and he passed away 2 weeks later, his family would have only gotten back whatever he put in at that point, okay? But because he put the money into the life insurance leg, it actually paid out a policy, okay? So that's why I said, no, it's only a suggestion. Person can go in whatever order they want to, but the idea is we want to protect you as the person because you're that source of income for your family. The other two legs, the emergency account and regular savings, is going to protect you while you're building your long-term wealth, all right? Because it's called long-term. We're not talking about tomorrow or next year. We're talking long-term, okay? So I have two situations that's happened to me since COVID. I had one client. Okay, yeah, so I had one client, once COVID hit, they called me and they were so thankful that they had the emergency account and the regular savings as well because they didn't miss a beat. When the employment cut back on the hours, they had money in that regular savings and emergency account, and they called me saying they were so thankful that they did that. The only thing they said that they wish they was doing it sooner. They would have had even more money set aside, but that helped get them through until things got back, somewhat normalized for them. Okay. On the other end, I had another client. All he did was the insurance and the long-term investments. I'm like, okay, if that's all you want to do right now, that's fine. But 8 months later, COVID happens. So if he needs some money and he didn't have a regular savings, which he didn't, and he didn't have an emergency account, where do you think that money had to come from? The long-term investments. And you understand Anytime you touch that long-term investment leg, it's going to set you back some years. Okay, so the emergency account and the regular savings act as a buffer or insurance on your long-term investment. So, because we all going to have things that come up we don't plan for. So if something comes up unexpectedly, you have your regular savings. If it's a little bit bigger, you have your emergency account. If it's really, really, really huge, you can get to your long-term investment, but hopefully you don't have anything that huge come up that you got to, go through those two levels before you get to your long-term investments, okay? So now we're going to talk about these long-term investments here, okay? All right, so this is a chart. Right, oh, well, before I go through this one right here with you guys really quickly, let me ask you guys this. Everybody on this call right now, I want you to go back and think back to when you were 20 years old, okay? Don't pay attention to the chart right now. Just listen to me right now, okay? Imagine you being 20 years old. Thank you. Okay. Now, imagine whatever job you had when you was 20, all right? You got that picture in your head? I know some of y'all, it's a little bit, around the corner. Some of us got to think back a little bit further. Okay, so imagine the job you had when you were 20, and imagine you have that same job to this day, okay? I don't care. Even if it was fast food, you're still at the fast food place, okay? If you were cutting grass, whatever you were doing when you were 20, you're still doing it to this day, okay? And also imagine you're going to be at that job from the age of 20 to the age of 65 years old. Your whole working career, that's all you're going to do, okay? Now, also imagine you still roughly making the same amount of money you were making when you was 20 as well, okay? Maybe a little bit more over time because, you at least keep up with inflation. So how many of you guys and ladies on this call right now think it was possible? I know somebody said that would suck. I know, just follow me for a second. How many of you guys think that was possible with that job only as your only source of income for that period of time? How many of you guys think it was possible to go through life and get the house, the cars, the family, all the stuff you desire, and still manage to put enough money aside on your own to have over $1 million by retirement? A lot of you guys said no right away. Okay, a lot of people said not possible, not living in my car, not at 20. Okay, these comments are great. Okay, perfect. All right, so now let me ask you this. How many of you guys think it was possible when you were 20 years old, every time you went to work when you were 20, you could set aside $2 every time you went to work? So that means, hypothetically, if you made $8 an hour, the first hour you only make $6 because you put $2 aside. After that first hour, you kept everything else at your normal pay for the rest of that day. How many of you guys think that was possible? Meaning every time you went to work when you were 20, you could have set aside $2. Okay, a lot of you guys saying yes. A lot of people say they spent more than $2 on lunch or $2 at the vending machine. Somebody said $1.01. That's funny. Okay, so, all right, so now I'm going to show you this chart, okay? But I want you to follow me as I'm showing this, all right? So I want you to look right there. I know there's a lot of numbers. Just follow me for a second. Look at the number 20, okay? So at the age of 20, if you could have saved $2 a day, which is actually only $61 a month, and if you do $61 a month every month for a year, that's $730 in a year, okay? So like, what am I showing you guys here? At the age of 20, if someone would have showed you to set aside $61 a month every month from the age of 20 to the age of 65, you could have over $1 million by retirement. You see at the top where it says $1 million? So before I explain to you guys exactly how that works, how many of you guys right now know somebody that wish they had known this right here when they were 20 years old? Okay. Now I'm gonna explain to you exactly how this works, but just follow me for a second, okay? Now, if you wait till you're 25 to get started, what does it say you have to do every month at 25? You see all the way over a little bit further? At 25, you gotta do how much a month? It says 109 a month. Y'all see that? Okay. If you wait till you're 30 to get started, now you gotta do 193 a month. You wait till you're 35 to get started, it's 340. You see what's happening, right? The longer you wait till you're 40 to get started, it's 625 a month, okay? So I'm explaining to you exactly how this works. But keep in mind, what I'm showing you, this is not a 401k. This is not a pension. This is something that you can do independent of any employer, okay? So when I first learned of this information, I was in my early 30s. Like I said, I was still teaching at the university. Someone sat me down and shared this with me. And I was like, there's no way in the world I can keep this to myself. I got to share this with other people. So when I first learned this, I was in my early 30s and I got started, okay? Now, I actually shared this chart with a group of ladies not too long ago, before COVID. And when one lady saw this information and she understood it, she actually got up from the table and walked away. Now, she eventually came back about 10 minutes later, but she said she was so upset when she understood this. She said her head started hurting and she was so angry she couldn't talk. I didn't find out till later on she was 65 years old. And y'all do see 65 not on the chart, right? You see it stops at 55 on the left-hand side, the age. Okay, so, but she did participate and she was talking to me and she was like, every so often as I was talking, she was like, babe, I'm not mad at you, but where were you 30 years ago? And I told her, I was alive 30 years ago. I didn't know this 30 years ago though, okay? So like I said, when I got started, I was in my early 30s, okay? So I went and got my investment license, which is, the same license as some of the people on Wall Street, so I can bring this information back to the community. So a lot of my family and friends that were in my generation in the early 20s or mid 20s, early 30s, they got started, okay? Even people in my mother's generation, they got started as well, right? Now I see somebody just asked a question. I'm about to address that in a second. But before I address that one, what you see at the top, what I really love about this right here, at the age, right now, my sister I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old nephew. They both have these accounts right here, okay? I have a 23-month baby girl. She has one of these accounts. I have a son that's on the way. He'll be here next month. He's about to have one of these accounts as soon as he gets a social security number, okay? So what I'm showing you guys is when it comes to building wealth, it's not necessarily about how much you have, it's more so about how long you have. Time is the biggest factor to make it easier for anybody to build wealth, okay? So I ask people all the time, how many of you guys still have your toys when you were 10 years old? And if you do, how often do you play with them? Okay, so the idea is we got to start doing something a little bit differently if we want a different outcome. All right, so one of my nephew's birthday was in July last month. Because I brought this information back to family and friends, people started calling me like, hey, how can I put money in so-and-so's investment account for his birthday? So I told my family a long time ago, I'm no longer giving toys and shoes and clothes for holidays and birthdays for the young people. I'm putting money in their investment accounts. And y'all do see a 10-year-old, you see what they have to put aside a day? Y'all see that says 66 cents a day, which is actually only less than $20 a month, okay? So the time is the biggest factor, all right? So if you wanna know more about this right here, definitely just write down 7-figure portfolio. I'm gonna show you exactly how this works, okay? All right, now, some of you guys pointed out that 12% annual interest. I'm gonna address that in a second because a lot of people's like, man, there's no way you're gonna get 12%, nowhere close to 12%, right? So I usually ask people, do anybody know any place where we can get you close to 12% rate of return legally every year? I always say that when I'm talking to my clients. Do you know any place where you can get close to 12% return legally every year? And people laugh at me because they say, if you didn't say the legal part, I can tell you. I'm like, that's not what we do. Everything is legal and compliant, okay? So what I'm gonna do really quickly, because I started bringing this information to families and they understand this, some of my clients actually say, you know what, I'm gonna give my children $1 million. I'm gonna give my nephews $1 million. Is anybody on this call like the opportunity or like the idea of giving a family member $1 million? Because if you would, I'm gonna show you something on the next slide, all right? Okay, keep in mind that 12%, but go on the next slide, I'm gonna show you. Okay, so this is another chart I share with people, all right? I told y'all time value, right? It's more so about time. So if you know anybody has a newborn child, you see where it says 0, right? If you put $750 in that account for that child when they're born and don't touch it anymore, put $750 in that account and don't touch it, what would that child have at the age of 66? Y'all see that? Go all the way down to the bottom. That child would have over $1.5 million. Can y'all imagine how different your life would look right now if someone had known to put $750 aside for you when you were born? What if your child is 6 years old? At 6, you see it says $1,500, right? What I'm telling you guys, what I'm showing you right now is you put this money aside and don't touch it anymore. Let that 12% or that compounding take place and they will have over 1.5 million. I have clients now that have this one couple I just sat down with, they have an 18-year-old child. Now, wait a minute, you tell me if I put $6,000 in this child's account and don't touch it no more, that child has a chance of having over $1 million? Exactly. All right, now a lot of people keep asking about this 12%, how you get close to 12%? All right, so before I show you, does everybody on this call know the difference between, say, a common stock and a mutual fund and how they work together? Does everybody know the difference of those pretty well? Like 100%, like you got them down pat? Yes, a little. Okay, so me as being a former educator, I do understand. Thank you. I see a no, I saw a little. Okay, perfect. I understand if one person says they don't know it that well or they know just a little bit, that means that there are others, okay? So I'm gonna give you an example of a common stock and a mutual fund and how they work together. If this doesn't make sense, y'all let me know. I'll come up with another way to explain it, okay? But a lot of my clients tell me when they hear of common stocks and mutual funds, they say they heard of it, but it sounds really confusing. It goes over their head. I'm gonna tell you this. If you're talking to somebody about a common stock and a mutual fund and have them explain the difference and they're making it really complicated, it's usually probably because of one or two reasons. Either one, they don't know it that well themselves, or two, they don't want you to understand it, okay? So I'm gonna give you an example of a common stock and a mutual fund. If this doesn't make sense, y'all let me know. We can come up with another way to explain it, all right? So everybody on this call, I want you to think about a mall. some big shopping mall that's around you that you like to go to, okay? Think of whatever that mall is, okay? So I'm from Atlanta. I mean, I'm gonna use Lenox in this idea, in this Lenox mall in Atlanta. So think about whatever mall that you can relate to, all right? Now, if I ask you, what's one store in that mall that you like, if I say, you know what, you can only shop in one store in that mall, what would that one store be? Okay? So in this instance, I'm gonna use, say, the Apple store, all right? There's an Apple store in Lenox, okay? So every month, imagine this. Imagine if I say, you know what, I wanna invest $100 in Apple every month. So every month, if I invest $100 in Apple, I want you to think about that as being a common stock, because Apple is a common enterprise, okay? So that means if Apple does well, I do well. But if Apple does poorly, I could lose everything. And to most people, that's too risky, right? That's high risk, high reward. But what if I told you guys, instead of putting that $100 in Apple, you take that same $100 and you spread it out amongst the entire mall. That way, only $1 go to Apple. $1 goes to Dillard's. $1 goes to Foot Locker. $1 goes to Panera Bread. $1 goes to Starbucks. Like literally, your $100 is spread out amongst the entire mall. Okay? If you do it that way, if Apple goes out of business, does the entire Lenox Mall shut down? No, they just, exactly, no, it won't. They just replace Apple with something else and keep going, right? So when you think about that concept, think about that as a mutual fund. So anytime you think about the mutual fund, you can use the mall idea that your money is spread out amongst every store in the mall, okay? So what we do is we put people in mutual funds, all right? So this next chart I'm gonna show you, this now, there are several mutual funds I can show you guys. All right? I just wanna show you guys one because a lot of people kept asking, where's this 12% coming from? What is 12%? So just really quick, this is one of the contracts that, one of the companies that I have relationships with, and we do a lot of stuff with them. Now, some of you guys might have to zoom in on your computer, but I want you to look on the right-hand side when it says, okay, perfect. Okay, so you got right here on the right-hand side, you see what it says inception date? What does that say on the right-hand side? What year did this fund come out? Can y'all see that? Y'all see it says 1948, right? So that fund been out longer than most of us on this call been alive. It may have a few of us, but all right, it's been out here for a long time, it's safe to say, right? What does that rate of return say since inception? What does that say? What right next to it? Y'all see that 10.5%? Ooh, that's pretty close to 12, isn't it? Okay, this has been out here for a long time. Just because I tell people all the time, just because you haven't heard of it, does not mean it's not out here and doing really well for some people. But if this information never makes it to certain communities, people don't have a clue what's going on, okay? All right, so what I'm, like I ask people all the time, if you wanna know more about mutual funds and how they work, just write that down and get my information. We'll sit down and talk one-on-one, but I can show you accounts that's been around since 1925 that's have double-digit returns. I can show y'all accounts that's happening right now. You get upset, but now when you look at this chart, what we're showing you here, at the bottom of that, you see like, okay, so this is gonna show you the returns that this account has had over the years, okay? So we're gonna look at almost a 20-year period, okay? So on your right-hand side, year 2000, you see it says 7.7% return, right? 2001, you see it lost 9%. But y'all know what happened in 2001, right? September 11. In the following year, it lost a little bit more, right? 24%, right? Because September 11, we still recovering. What happened in 2003? It went back up 28%. So hold on, I'm gonna stop right there for a second. What I'm showing you guys is a managed mutual fund. It's a difference between manage and not manage, okay? So it's like a managed account, if they moving stuff in and out on a regular basis to correct itself, when stuff happens, okay? So in 2004, what happened? They got 11% return, all right? Then 2005 at 8.5%. So y'all see what's happening, right? So every year, look at 2008, you had the housing crisis, it lost 33%. What happened the following year? It jumped back up 34%. So I tell people, so I'm gonna stop right here for a second. If you don't have a financial personal advisor to stand there and hold your hand, most people would jump off the ledge at 33% loss. Like, oh man, the market, I'm gonna pull my money out. So right now, if you got a 33% loss and you didn't pull your money out, that's just a paper loss. It's okay, just hold on. In the following year, you see what happened, right? So you recovering. But if you took that money out, that 33% loss, then you got a realized loss now because you took your money out. So that's why I tell people it's always best to have a financial advisor, somebody that can walk you off the cliff, walk you off the edge when you're feeling jumpy. Like I had several clients, when COVID happened, they wanted to jump out. But let me give y'all this analogy right here. I love using the analogy of a mall, okay? So I use the analogy of Apple, the Apple store in Lenox. So imagine this, every month I go to Apple and I spend $200 a month on Apple. Every month I just buy stuff on Apple for $200, okay? For some reason this month I go on Apple, everything is 90% off. Do you think I'm gonna buy more or less stuff with that $200 that I've been spending every month? I will hope you say I'll buy more stuff, right? Because everything's 90% off. Now, what if they told me, hey, Mr. Pelham, this month, I know everything's 90% off, but as long as you keep your receipt, if the price is redeemed at its regular price, say next month or whatever, and you bring the receipt back, we'll redeem it at that new price. So meaning if I buy a laptop that's usually $2,000 and they give it to me for $40, if I bring it back next month and the price is back at $2,000, they're gonna get a laptop back to me at $2,000. If they tell you that, would you buy even more or less stuff? A lot of clients say they try to buy the whole store. That's the way we think about it. When the market tanks, everything's on sale. Put more money in. When the market recovers, then some people can add a zero to their investment portfolio. So we understand the language, you understand the game, you know how to navigate it. So we stopped at 2009 and you came back at 34%. 2000, exactly, just like March. I got a lot of clients so excited right now because I walked them off the ledge. They put more money in. When the market recovered, I'm like their best friend. They're introducing me to everybody, okay? So 2010, 15%, 2011, not too good. 2012, so you see what's happening. This is what's happening when you have a managed portfolio, okay? So I just want to show y'all this one account because a lot of people thought there's no way possible you're gonna get somewhere close to 10.5%, or excuse me, 12% every year. I can show you other accounts that's well over 10.5, okay? But I just want to know, I don't want to just tell you stuff without giving you evidence and the substance of it. So that's pretty much the information and how I break this stuff down to my clients. But we start with that table. And from that table, we fund the whole table. Everything is just as important, but it's a particular order that we have to go in, okay? So that's my time, that's my information. If you want, you got any questions, feel free to either email me or text me and we'll get back with you guys, okay? But I thank you guys for this opportunity and I'm excited, the direction we're going in.
Thank you so much, Frederick. That was great information. And hopefully there'll be a little bit of time for some questions. Next up, we have Hannibal Bronski from the National Credit Union Foundation. Hannibal provides executive leadership overseeing the financial risk management, operational and administrative functions of the foundation. Welcome, Hannibal.
Thank you, Julie. I want to say a special thank you to Renee and the AACUC leadership for keeping financial equity as a point of focus. I believe this is a brave and ambitious endeavor, but it's not only a brave one, but it extends an opportunity for hope. And it's not just hope as a pie in the sky kind of concept, but it's hope that is anchored in the reality of a commitment to change. I want to say thank you to Camille and Frederick, my panelists, who's done an excellent job in sharing with us some of the current state of wealth and income gap, with some basic tools from an individual perspective of some concrete actions that may be possible. What I would like to do, and I'm going to stay on this slide for a few minutes, I just wanted to switch our attention to more of a macro level view, looking at the opportunity and challenge that's before us as a movement, that is in terms of the credit union movement on this road to financial equity. You see, we are in the midst of two crises. There's, of course, the medical crisis and the race to find a vaccine. Of course, there's, in addition to the medical crisis, we're also facing a financial crisis, and both of which have deepened the existing wealth and health disparity. In addition, from an earnings perspective, it has further revealed how economically fragile and vulnerable a large percentage of the population is to income volatility. Of course, there is the often quoted shared report that tells us that 40% of Americans can't cover a $400 emergency expense. People are living paycheck to paycheck. And these numbers are even more pronounced in minority communities and Black businesses. 90% of African-American businesses are sole proprietorship with less than 5 employees. Only 1 in 10 Black businesses have a line of credit, according to the New York Federal Reserve Board. A recent Wall Street Journal article indicated that 41% of Black-owned businesses has just disappeared in April since the COVID-19 incident occurred as a result of this crisis. And these are not just statistical numbers or percentages that's been thrown around. These are in fact real people. The unexpected impact of this crisis, of course, has disproportionately affected communities of color and made worse when layered with the existing structural problem of bank flight from minority communities leaving behind banking deserts. If we can switch to the next slide, please. If you look at this particular graph, it shows, and of course this is from The Economist, you will see the significant drop in terms of net openings with reference to bank branches. The line showing there, you can see from 2005 to 2017, and the light blue indicating the number of branch closures between 2005 and 2017. So when it comes to closure of these bank branches, of course, geography matters. So if we just drill deeper into these numbers and look at two examples of the large banking institutions, you will see that JP Morgan Chase shrank its bank branches, the footprint in the majority Black areas, by 23% between 2010 to 2018. While Bank of America reduced the number of branches in majority Black neighborhoods by 29% to 18, compared to 18% in non-majority Black areas. The loss of a bank, of a financial institution, has a significant impact on communities. The cost is, of course, greatest for small businesses because at the local community level, so much of business is driven by relationships. A 2014 study out of the University of California, Berkeley, estimates that when branches close, new business lending falls by 13% in surrounding areas. In low-income neighborhoods, such lending contracts by nearly 40%. Just think about it. In low-income neighborhoods, such lending contracts by nearly 40% because of the absence of a financial institution in that community. Of course, credit unions have played a very important role in helping to fill the void arising from these banking deserts. If we can go to the next slide, please. You can see the significant growth in terms of looking at the total assets of credit unions collectively between 1975 and 2019. So credit unions have seen a significant increase in their total assets, which have grown to just under $2 trillion collectively. So credit unions also help to serve as a buffer between their members and predatory peddlers of financial services. So however, while the asset growth of credit unions have been impressive, we have our work cut out for us as we work to fulfill our mission as credit unions. Especially when we take a closer look at the demographics of credit unions. I love the quotes, the various quotes that Camille included in her presentation. And I told her I'm going to borrow one of her quotes, the Jane Baldwin one. And it says that not everything that is phased can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is phased. So what I did, because I love numbers, I took the opportunity to look at the demographics of credit unions and just divided it into three buckets. On the left side, I said, those credit unions that have less than $100 million in terms of assets, the middle section with 100 to 500 million in assets, and those in excess of $500 million or over $1 billion in assets. If you look at the first line, the total population in terms of number of credit unions, and of course the numbers can be updated to most recent ones, which would probably be 5,100 as opposed to 5,400. You will see that as a percentage, those credit unions that are in excess of 500 million on the extreme right side accounted for 11% in terms of the number of credit unions. On the extreme left side, you will see those credit unions that are less than 100 million accounted for 3,700 credit unions, representing 70% of the total number of credit unions. But what is even more interesting, if you look at the total assets, like we said in the earlier slide, we have seen a significant growth in the total assets of credit unions. But that percentage in terms of the growth of credit unions, you will see the majority of that is 79% of the total assets of all credit unions combined is from the 11% of those credit unions that are in excess of 500 million. Those that are less than 100 million accounts for only 6% of the total assets of all credit unions combined. And the number and the story is the same when you look at our membership in terms of the total membership of credit unions. So those credit unions that are in excess of 500 million accounts for 73% of the total membership of all credit unions. If we go to the next slide, you will see that the challenge is even more pronounced when we compare the total assets of banks versus those of credit unions. You can see the disparity in terms of, if you look at the total 2019 number, all the way on the extreme right, you can see the huge gap between the blue line, which represents banks in terms of their total assets, and those of credit unions in terms of just under $2 trillion. So why is all of this relevant and important? Like we said earlier, the presence and absence of a financial institution impacts a local community. The economic growth and vibrancy of a community is impacted. There is a direct correlation between the mortgage lending, the help, the absence or presence of a financial institution helps to support and undergird local businesses in our community. And the financial institutions also provide a channel for access to capital. In some of the earlier conversations that Camille and Frederick talked about, we talk about the wealth gap, we talk about the income gap. But the reality in terms of closing the wealth gap, we know, I think it was Camille that said earlier, it cannot just be closed purely by savings. If we're talking about closing the wealth gap, one thing that is critical is being able to support small businesses to be able to create some additional wealth. So if we consider how the recent Paycheck Protection Program was administered, it will give us a window into why these things are important. Financial institutions were used as the primary distribution channel for getting these funds into the hands of businesses and communities. If you look at this particular graph, you will see in terms of the first line for banks, the total loan count in terms of that means the total number of loans that went out of banks was just over 4.4 million loans that bank distributed, representing 90% of the total number of loans that were distributed. If you look at the net dollars, a total of $496 billion passed through the hands of banks in the middle section there. And that represented the number of banks that participated was 4,273 banks, representing 79% of the total number of lenders that participated in the program. Why is that important? If we consider the fact that banks are fleeing from minority communities and low-income communities, and we say that is a primary distribution of funds, you can see how that impacts unfairly those communities. I mean, I think it's amazing that with the resources that credit unions have, they were able to distribute $9.7 billion to their communities, representing only 2%, but that's still an important number in terms of getting funds into the hands of small businesses and communities of color. But that is why it is so important that as an ecosystem for credit unions, we have to meet the challenge to be able to respond effectively as a channel for distribution of funds into communities of color, into low-income communities. It is so critical. And so while fintech are playing an important role, you will see that fintech accounted for only 1% of the funds that was distributed. My thesis on that is, of course, because fintechs don't necessarily have the relationships that credit unions have. And so as a result, they were not effective in terms of being able to distribute those funds into those communities. And of course, these numbers were as of June 30th, 2020, and we know the program continues. But before we leave this slide again, just to draw your attention, if you look at the credit union numbers, you will see on the extreme right, the lender count, approximately 930 credit unions participated in the Paycheck Protection Program. Why is that number significant? If we know that the total population of all credit unions is in excess of 5,000, that represents just under 20% of credit unions that participated in the Paycheck Protection Program. And so it's definitely important. And I think it's even made even more clearer if we drill into the numbers and take a look at two of the large banks that we mentioned earlier, JP Morgan and Bank of America. JP Morgan, as of June 30th, had distributed a total of 269,000 loans. The total dollar amount accounted for over $29 billion that passed through the hands of JP Morgan Chase. And in addition to distributing those funds, they earned fees for processing those loans in excess of $800 million. Imagine what that would have done to our credit union ecosystem if we were earning that significant amount in terms of fees, and if we were distributing those amount of funds within our communities. The story is the same for Bank of America. Bank of America, as of June 30th, had distributed over 334,000 loans, representing in excess of $25 billion, and earning fees in excess of $755 million. So what can we do as a movement and as we contemplate the importance of our role as a social enterprise? I must admit, there is so much that is already being done that it seems unfair to even ask more of us as credit unions. But in the face of so much need and knowing that lives are at stake here, and myself personally, as someone who has experienced and is enjoying the sacrifice of those that have gone ahead, I'm humbled and encouraged. As an immigrant who's been in the US for over 20 years, I know the privilege that I enjoy. But I still know that there is still much more that can be done in our credit union ecosystem. So it is with a deal of humility that I offer up a summary of 3 priority areas as a basis for deeper conversations as we move forward. The first is in terms of purpose as our competitive advantage. We need to stay true to who we are. I know there's a lot that have been talked about in terms of purpose. There's a lot of books written about purpose and the efficacy of purpose and why is it important. But it's true that during times of crisis, that our purpose, whether it's on an individual or an organizational level, is tested. This crisis we are currently facing is, of course, no exception. The purpose as credit unions is undergoing a stress test. This is not a test of the adequacy of our capital requirements, while that is important, but instead this is a test of our commitment to the ideals that originally formed the basis for which credit unions were established. I am truly amazed that we have been able to withstand the onslaught of pressure from banks, especially given how regulation and technology has changed the game. In an environment where trust is becoming a rare commodity, why we exist must continue to permeate every aspect of what we do, who we are as a credit union. We cannot take it for granted that we already know all of this. Our board, our employees, all of this must impact, and we must ask ourselves some deep questions. For the sake of time, I won't dwell on this. I will go on to the next area, which is in terms of they expand the reach of credit unions. We must build capacity. Just taking a look at the example that we talked about earlier with reference to how the PPP check, Paycheck Protection Funds were distributed. I mean, as I thought about this, I thought about three things that impacted our ability to not have maximized the distribution of those funds. I think one is with reference to how credit unions are funded or in terms of the capital structure. And I know I'm way above my head in this particular area because there's so many experts on the table, but I will still venture into it. Because I think capital infusion into credit unions is so critical. We can no longer, especially for the smaller credit unions, it cannot be based purely on retained earnings as a source of growing credit unions. It's going to take too long. We don't have that much time to wait for credit unions to build up its reserve as a way to expand and to increase our growth. And there's so much more that can be said about that, but I will talk about the second area in terms of expanding and building capacity. Credit unions must become technically enabled. It does not mean that necessarily everyone has to go and develop a new app, but how do we partner those credit unions that are already technically enabled with those that are not? The third area is around talent, and we must do a better job in terms of a greater investment in our frontline employees and all of our employees. And then of course, the third area is around democratized access to capital. And when I say democratized access to capital, we must find, it does not necessarily mean going out and building 100 new branches. We understand the economics of those, but we must have a deeper level of engagement with the community groups that we serve to help us in terms of being effective as a distribution channel. We must leverage technology, whether it's digital, social media, and we must act as a collective group, building stronger partnerships and cross collaboration. There is no single magic bullet that can eliminate all of the barriers on this road to financial equity. From a policy perspective, there are fiscal policies that must come to bear. From an individual perspective, there are actions that must be taken on a personal level. Similarly, as credit unions and as an ecosystem, there are things that we have been doing and must continue to embrace in facilitating this journey on the road to financial equity. So I'll stop there, like I said, because of time, but there is much more that needs to be discussed with reference to this area and what we can do. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannibal. That was great information. Now we're going to open up the things up for the questions for our panelists. So if any of you have any questions, please type them in and also put in questions for speakers so we can identify those. And we're going to start off by asking, all of you talked about amazing topics and you did a great job with talking about all of these things that we need to address. but what would be the starting place if we wanted to take action regarding pay equity and the racial economic divide now?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. That's a really great question. I think the starting place, and somebody mentioned it in the chat, really is so the mindset, and that comes with the understanding, making sure that you are armed with as many resources as possible and really doing some scanning. So I've been answering some of the questions and, you know, what are some resources that I can leverage and what can I do? I think that the starting place is really wrapping your arms around what's available to you, your level of access to that knowledge and that understanding, and then creating a cohort. And so I think twofold, you can have a cohort both within your company and externally where you talk about these issues and how you can create change. I think that the advantage of having a cohort outside of your company externally is that when the social unrest began after the murder of George Floyd, my sorority sisters and I all compared notes. And so we all got to.
I think we lost Camille, right? So again, we'll go ahead and send out these slides, and Shelton, I'll send it back to you.
All right, thank you so much. Let's give a virtual applause to all of our panelists. You guys did an amazing job. Camille, Frederick, Hannibal, like so much great information. And even though we lost Camille, I wholeheartedly agree with her about raising the awareness around Black Women Equal Pay Day. That's something that more people should know about. So again, let's give them a virtual round of applause. Before we conclude the general session, there are a few announcements, right? And one of the announcements that I get to make right now are about the prizes, and I'm so excited. First, our title sponsor, PSCU, is once again giving away a pair of Apple AirPods. The prize winner is Grace Thompson from Local Government Federal Credit Union. All right.
Congratulations.
Second, today's program sponsor, Visa, is giving away JBL Bluetooth speaker. The prize winner is my friend, Deborah Fears of Chicago Post Office Federal Credit Union. So big ups. And third, our final prize for today is a $50 gift card from AACUC, and the lucky winner is Monica Moore from WECU. Congratulations to all our prize winners. We will be in contact with you. If you are not currently a member and would like to stay engaged, we encourage you to join AACUC. I promise you it will be a life-changing membership, life-changing event to join AACUC. It's done so much for me, strengthened my network, strengthened me as a professional, and I know it will do the same for you. Visit the AACUC booth or join directly on the aacuc.org website. Next up, please visit our vendor exhibit hall, which is open until 6:30 p.m. The Young Professionals Summit Super Panel of CU Equity Leaders begins at 4:45 p.m. The Women's Chat discussing the money moves and Men's Chat on collaboration both start at 6:30 p.m. The AACUC After Hours Reflections from Day 4 session starts at 7:15. We look forward to seeing you at one of these events. We truly appreciate you joining us for the Day 4 of the African American Credit Union Coalition's Commitment to Change Conversation Series virtual conference. We hope that you were inspired and empowered to make a difference. We encourage you to keep the conversation going tonight and tomorrow at your organization and on social media with our hashtags. Thank you again for your support, and thank you again for being so open and so encouraging of our presenters in the chat portal. We look forward to seeing you again soon, tomorrow, hopefully. All right, everyone, have a great evening.